4 of those years. So some of the energy policies that we may get into, you can blame me for, or at least starting it. Prior to that, I worked in pretty much the food nutrition world. I'm a nutritionist by profession. I'm still a registered dietitian, but my certification, I decided just to give it up because I don't think I'm ever going back to work in that regard. So it was good to just have as a background just in case. I'm going to cover, I wasn't going to do a PowerPoint, but I thought it would be great just to have kind of start somewhere to present basic information and then kick off to whatever kind of questions, comments, thoughts you have. Is there anything in particular that you want to make sure I hit as I'm going through this, or just go through it and then we just open up questions and discussion afterwards?
Let's see what you got.
Sounds good.
You see what we got? Okay.
Yeah.
Very pretty picture.
You have one.
Where is that?
One question.
One question.
Bob, right behind you.
2 questions. You don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one question I had, just dealing with one of our members recently. They put up a pretty large array of solar, and once that went up, they had put together a deal with a local school to transmit through the utility, and there was a lot of challenges getting the utility itself to actually help them fulfill that agreement. And I think there are some different issues with people producing renewable energy, but then it seems like the grid's full. So I think if you could address that.
Okay, good, I'll do that. Yeah, there's we're experiencing some significant challenges because of the sheer volume of solar in particular that has been built. So, and I can touch upon that. And there's it's like it's a victim of our own success, right? But there's opportunities moving forward, and we do need to think strategically about the future deployment of solar in particular, but renewable energy in general in Vermont. So I will touch upon that. Okay, so 3 Mountain Power. We serve 263,000 customers. You see how much of the state we actually cover, so all the green is us. Our portfolio, we're 63% renewable and 90% carbon free. The difference is nuclear. Our nuclear contract will go down over time, and our amounts of renewable will increase. We own and operate quite a significant number of renewable energy facilities in Vermont. You see how much hydro we have. We have 2 wind farms. We have some large solar projects. Our solar projects are tied with battery storage, and I'll explain in a bit why that's important. And important also is just how much of infrastructure that we have to manage and maintain, some of which went out less today. But as you can see, over 11,000 miles of distribution lines, sub-transmission lines, and our substations. And we've been doing quite a bit to harden our system, meaning knowing that as the climate is changing, our system is more under attack, more vulnerable. So we're doing things to help strengthen that in light of the kind of storms that we've been seeing of late. So we are motivated in terms of serving our customers, and also doing our part to address the issue of climate change. So both from a carbon perspective and from a resiliency perspective, we're focused on both reducing carbon, but also creating a system that will help power to stay on when the grid goes down. And today is a good time to be doing this presentation, given just what happened over the last 2 days, and I'll talk about that in a second. So this was last November's storm. This was a heavy wet snowstorm in November. We had 115,000 customers out. That may have been the most ever. We had a number, not as big as this, but during 2018, towards the tail end, the last quarter of that, we had, I think, 4 to 6 major storms, or at least big storms, this being the biggest. But we're seeing more of these, and these kind of storms, they result in people being out for extended periods. It took us about 5 days to get folks restored on this, when everyone restored. And
It's, again, worse than what happened the last few days, but what happened in this storm that we're currently still in, I think is a sign of what is to come. And I've been talking with communities around the state, explaining to them just that. And I joke about this, but in the past, the way towns actually handled storms is, power went out, they're pretty patient at first, and they wait for the power to come back on. And then if it's gonna be for extended periods, some have some emergency protocols to address those folks who are most in need. But for the most part, they wait for storms for the power to come back on, and they call us when they get frustrated, right? But we're able to get power restored pretty quickly, in large part because we're able to get resources from other states and from Canada. When Vermont, and in this case, Vermont was the one most heavily hit, so there were actually a lot of resources that we could pull in. And at one point, we had over 1,000 people in the field getting power turned on. Now, think about that. This is one of the things I learned and was really awed by when I joined Green Mountain Power. When you look at what it takes to actually respond to a storm, it's like a military operation. It really is, because you've got 1,000 people in the field. You've got to feed, you've got to house, you've got to get them to the right place. You've got to make sure they know where they're going and that they're doing the work they need to go, especially when you have companies or crews coming from other states, other jurisdictions, etc. So it's a major operation. So what happened over the last 2 days is, I think, what's going to become more the norm, and that is the storms that we're seeing are getting bigger. So they're impacting not just Vermont, but all of New England. And when all of New England goes down, we're small compared to all of them. Resources that they may be able to give to us, that they're not because they're using it. So then we're all looking for resources from other places further away. And we're competing for that. And we found that this storm, normally we would have been able to get a lot more resources than we actually wound up getting. We still get everyone back on, probably by the end of today, with about 34,000 customers affected by the storm yesterday. But we would have been able to get them on a lot sooner had there been more resources available. So what I tell towns when they're thinking about the future, they really need to think about outages that actually are going to last a lot longer than they're typically accustomed to. And they need to have in place plans to make sure that the most vulnerable are taken care of, and that they have places that people can go to recharge their batteries, to get some warmth, whatever it is that they decide is needed. But that conversation needs to happen at the local level. And I think the question that people need to ask is simply, what happens if we're out of power for 2 weeks, 3 weeks? That's the question they need to answer, and then plan accordingly. So this is the traditional grid, right? Large power plants, usually from far away, moving power through transmission lines, through substations, onto our sub-transmission lines, through our substations, distribution lines to your homes. It was always one way, and these power plants, again, usually far away, is what produces large amounts. And this worked really, really well for 100 years. It's not the most efficient way of delivering electricity. The further those electrons travel, the more loss there is. And when it comes to resiliency, not so resilient, because when any of these big power lines come down, then we're in trouble. And we've seen that for some major storms. What's happening, both because I think it's what customers want, but also as a way of building resiliency, and also as a way of reducing our carbon footprint through electricity, we're moving more towards a distributed generation model where renewable energy is being sited, small scale renewable energy is being sited closer to where the power is actually used. And in Vermont, when we look at just solar development that's happened, I think I went to 2013, so I can't see, somewhere over here, right? We had 20 megawatts of solar in 2013. And wasn't that long before we had like
When I served in the legislature, we had nothing. In
Yeah.
2008, I was, I think, the first to put solar on my roof in Waterbury, or at least among the first.
And then in 2013, we had 20, but then you've seen what happened with solar development in Vermont. We now presently have 275 megawatts of solar in the ground. We have another 125 megawatts of solar applications that are in the queue, right? So we're looking at almost 400 megawatt, I bet you it's over 400 megawatts now, this was 2 weeks ago, we have applications coming in every day. So we have 400 megawatts of solar, just in Green Mountain Power territory, that's either been built or will likely be built. Our average daily load is 470 megawatts. So on a sunny day, that's not a peak, not really hot day, or really cold day, you know, we're needing as much as 80%, 85% of our power just from local generation. So again, the amount of solar, and the difference here is, this is net metering, this is everything else, and there are other programs in promoting solar development. And this could be just a developer building solar and selling the power to the utility, to us, through a power purchase agreement. The standard offer program, for those of you who know that, and in here are some of the projects that Green Mountain Power has built ourselves. And when you can add these two up, this is the line of solar development in Vermont. So in terms of the resiliency piece, this will help with the resiliency, but there's actually more we can do, and I think need to do moving forward in terms of the build out of solar, because there is only so much capacity on the grid, to your point, on the grid. If we fill that capacity with large systems that actually are less resilient than other systems, then we won't be building the kind of resiliency that I think we need for the future. Oh, and this just, by the way, so this map, we have a solar map on our website, and the solar map we developed is at least 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And it was to help developers know where best to site solar, because as we started seeing more and more development happening, our lines, our substations, our infrastructure was getting saturated, and it was going to become more and more challenging to actually interconnect, or more expensive to interconnect. So we're directing solar developers to areas where they'd have less hurdles to overcome to deploy their solar, and that's on our website. I'm going the wrong way, right? So we have committed, and again, that first picture about the climate and what's happening, we've committed to 100% renewable by 2030, and to 100% carbon-free by 2025. So in 5 years, we'll be 100% carbon-free, and that carbon-freeness will be part renewable, part nuclear, and then over time, by the time we get to 2030, we'll be 100% renewable.
Robert, you can make these claims of renewable because we use hydro from Quebec.
The good part, yeah.
Some states don't count that as renewable.
Right.
So what's the future going to look like? Is there going to be some uniformity that's going to be imposed upon us and them, or?
Right. I think what you're going to see is some, at least other New England states will be viewing large hydro as renewable.
Because they see the RECs being more valuable.
It's, you know, well, first of all, we believe it's a renewable resource. The reason why Vermont has such a high renewable requirement, our renewable requirement in Vermont, I think, it started at 55% renewable in 2017, right? And then going up to, it's been a while now, whatever, 90% renewable by 2050, whatever it is. We're required to meet that renewable standard. It was known that that would be a very heavy lift. We're talking about all premium renewables, so all new stuff, wind, new solar, et cetera. That would be a pretty expensive thing to meet. So the legislature still wanted to tout the renewableness, and they wanted to do it in a cost-effective way. So by being able to include existing renewable energy plants, things that have been built, have been around for a while, including Hydro-Quebec, in the overall portfolio
Mhm.
as renewable, we can actually tout a very high renewable standard.
Yeah.
If Hydro-Quebec, or those large hydros, were not allowed to be included in the renewable portfolio that we're required to meet, that standard would have been just a lot lower. You know, to me, it's like, it's renewable, let's just claim it, and that's what we did. But there is still a requirement, so even though there's this bigger requirement of, again, starting at 55% renewable for all utilities in Vermont, there is a subcategory of a requirement, which is basically in-state new generation that we have to meet as well, and we're meeting that. And obviously, given all that solar development that you see, meeting that requirement, we're able to do just because of that, for the most part. There's a lot more to that, but I'll stop there. So when we talk about resiliency, solar is an important component of that, but when the grid goes down, your solar system on your roof, I was gonna say mine, but mine actually stays up now. Your solar system is disconnected, so you don't have power, right? So even though you have solar on your roof, the grid goes down, your system is shut off. Is everybody aware of that? And the reason for that is, we can't have electrons being put onto the grid while our crews are working the lines, right? And when the lines go down, your system goes down. Now, the way you get around that is you install battery systems.
Powerwall.
Yeah, and it could be it doesn't have to be Powerwall. We have programs that are using the Powerwall, but other battery manufacturers now are stepping into the space, and we're opening up opportunities for them to participate and partner with us in deploying their batteries. But when you hook up a battery to a solar system, which I now have in my house, when the lines go down, I get disconnected from the grid, and I still have power. And then I'll manage my power between the sun and my batteries in a way, hopefully, to stretch this out for the length of or duration of the outage. That's the kind of resiliency we need to have at the home, the business, and the community level. The home level, this did not exist before Green Mountain Power got involved in this. That's why we're seen as one of the most innovative utilities in the country.
Yeah.
And no utility partnered with a solar battery manufacturer to test this technology. We did. So we started this about 3 years ago, where we took their Powerwall 1.0, which after 6 months they came to the 2.0, so we did away with that and started this new Powerwall program. Again, just to talk about just how innovation and things are changing. Anyway, we deployed over 2,000 of these batteries now. And anybody who signs up for one of these batteries, they pay to get a battery, but they don't pay the full freight. We actually pay a pretty significant portion of that, right? Other customers pay a pretty significant portion of that. But the other customers also get value from that actually in the end saves them money, saves all our customers money. How does that happen? We access these batteries. So if there's a storm coming, we leave it, and this way you'll have your backup power. But for the rest of the time, when we need power, local power, let's say there's peak demand happening, we will go and discharge these batteries. We have enough batteries now out there to get us over 10 megawatts of power during those peak instances. And the result of that is cost savings for all our customers. So what we do is we look at how much money will we save our customers if we reduce peak by a certain amount, right? And let's say we're gonna save $1. And we say, okay, we will spend 80 cents to install these things, including your contribution and what we're paying for these things. And the difference of 20 cents is, call it profit or whatever, that benefit goes back to all our customers in helping to reduce rates. So everything we do, all the innovation that we do, all the incentives that we offer, we look at what the net benefit is. And if there's a positive benefit to all our customers by helping to reduce overall costs and rates, that's what we promote and that's what we get involved in. So this has been very successful in achieving that. And there was just one point in time when, one day, by deploying batteries, we saved $500,000 for our customers.
So was that like a hot day where the demand was up?
Yep, that's
Gotcha.
exactly right. And now our peak, how many people, when does our peak hit? So it's a hot day, right? It's a hot sunny day. When
When
do
we
you
come
imagine
home.
that peak? What?
When we come home?
Yeah,
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Anybody else wanna guess? 5, yeah. It moved. It used to be like the 1 o'clock, but because of the amount of solar we have now, there's no daytime peak anymore. Unless it's a really hot, miserable day and there's no sun. Then and everyone has their air conditioners on, we make it an earlier peak then. The peaks now, for the most part, have moved to early evening, just because of the amount of solar development, we have.
Everybody's home and running stuff,
Right.
and there's not that much sun anymore.
Exactly, and you can see exactly that curve, what happens, in terms of solar production and peak demand. Okay. So some of the incentives that we're offering, so we want people to use electricity, right? And this is not about Green Mountain Power making money, by the way. People think, oh, you just want to sell more electricity, right? Because Green Mountain Power doesn't make their money selling electricity. It's the profits for the company and the sale of electricity are separated. We want people to use more electricity so we can help put downward pressure on rates. We have some significant rate drivers that we absolutely have no control over. We are doing everything internally, like any business, everything internally to reduce our own costs. Our head count is down from 750 employees 5 years ago, to 503 employees today. Everything we do, every expenditure we make, we look at whether it's needed and how do we find savings. Just like any business, right? So we're doing that, but there are just some costs. There's state energy policy. There's just being part of the New England grid that we have no control over. We get those bills, we have to pay it. We also have declining loads. So we sell less electricity today than we did in 2003, I think. Our load has been doing this. And why, you ask? Well, in part, it's self-generation, so just the whole net metering stuff, self-generation. In large part, it's just, we've lost manufacturing plants, and we're not replacing them, right? So just load declining because of population business, and efficiency. So this state has made, over the last 20 years, significant investment in efficiency, right, through Efficiency Vermont. And
Right.
they produce significant savings. So those three things combined, we are selling less electricity today. Now, our costs haven't gone down, right? They've gone up.
Infrastructure, yeah.
Right, the infrastructure that we have, and now the infrastructure, now we're not building new infrastructure.
No.
We're hardening that which we have. So to go back to what I said earlier about, hardening against future storms, we're spending a lot of resources moving lines that currently are in woods, right? They were on open plains at one time, right? And trees grew around them. We're moving them to roadside. That helps to do two things. One, they're only subject to trees on one side because you have the road on the other. And then when it comes to restoration, it's a lot easier for our guys, and the line crew are all guys, to drive to the place where the problem is, as opposed to, which they still do, having to imagine those cold, windy, rainy days where they're actually walking through the right-of-way through the woods to repair a pole that was broken or the lines are down, and having to do that all by foot manually. Obviously it takes a lot more time to restore that kind of power in that situation versus just having it on roadside. So it's more resilient to have it on the roadside, and it's easier and quicker to get it restored. So our expenses, with load declining, the more we can do to help build load, but building load with clean, carbon-free energy is how we achieve kind of the carbon reduction. Now, for you anybody's in the fossil fuel industry, I'm sorry, but the future is, how do we use less of that, and how do we use more clean electricity? And that's what we're helping to promote. So we provide these incentives. You buy a new vehicle, we'll give you up to $2,500 for a new vehicle. You buy any,
This is for, if your income eligible, you can get up to 25, if you, just everybody else gets 1,500. I should just leave that. Heat pumps will give you $400, e-bikes and e-mowers. So we are providing incentives to promote the technologies that are cleaner, they're gonna help build load as a way of addressing carbon, but also as a way of reducing costs for all our customers by us being able to sell more electricity, so all our fixed costs get spread over more electrons, so each individual is not paying as much. This probably sounds very familiar in terms of healthcare, insurance, and schools. It's the same thing. So these programs are kind of like available to all our customers, residential customers in particular. But we spend a lot of time working with our commercial and industrial customers, because they use a lot of fossil fuels. And what we want to do is help them move to electric, right, for the reasons I just stated. And I have 3 examples of what has happened, and this is just a line extension, so it's a slate quarry that used a diesel generator. They looked at the cost of doing a line extension, and they decided it wasn't working for them or feasible for them. So because of our requirements, and we are required to reduce carbon in our customer base, we were able to provide an incentive that made the line extension economical for them. And the result is, this is how much carbon we'll remove from the atmosphere as a result of that investment. Diesel fuel air compressors for snowmaking, they're now electric. This is how many pounds of carbon we'll be taking out of the atmosphere as a result of that. And no project is too big or too small, so this was a propane coffee maker that we switched to electric, and the result in more carbon reduction. So that's kind of the overview, and I still will get to, I think, more to your question. But any other question? Yeah.
So are you saying there's no coal in your mix?
Only, there's, no, because well, it could be the 10%, so we're 90% carbon free, 10% we're getting from the New England region.
Right.
Now, I don't know if there are any coal plants in New England, then, that would be part of it. If there is, then it's a pretty small percentage, but yes, potentially, yes.
There's at least one in Bowdoin, New Hampshire.
Okay, so chances are,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't know if they're running all the time, but if they are, then they're putting their power on the grid. And to the extent that it is just market power, so they're getting whatever they can get from the market for that, it's part of the mix. And when we buy market power, then that will be part of our mix as well.
So the Powerwall is really interesting for residential applications, but I'm wondering if you have any experience with the larger scale commercial,
Oh, thank you.
the big brother that I think they call Power Pack.
Yeah, so I don't, so thank you, actually, I was going on, I forgot, I was going on that track and then I totally lost my train of thought. So when I was talking about the Powerwall, both home, business, community based, right? So the home stuff, we kinda got down pat now, right? And now we have it now where we've opened up our platform to any developer or seller of batteries, or anybody who wants to get in the business, they can sell it. We'll actually give them an incentive to help them sell it if they are able to connect to our platform, and we say what batteries can, and then we control them in the same way. So again, so it brings value to all our customers. It's called Bring Your Own Device. We wanted to do BYOB, bring your own battery, but I thought it was cool, but for obvious reasons. So that's set. Now, commercial entities, batteries are still kind of expensive for just the average business to do it. We've actually put out an RFP asking folks for ideas. So if you have a project that you want to do that involves battery storage with a commercial entity, let us know your ideas, and we will work with you. Again, there's incentive there, and we will help pay for that as long as we can access it and use it to help reduce overall costs. Now, there is a state building, this is well known, it's owned by the state, and we, working with them, and just installed backup batteries in that facility and took out the old generator, which had to be replaced anyway. And it's the same thing where we'll be actually using that battery when that very fancy building doesn't need it. So I think we're gonna see more of that, especially as prices come down. So it's just a matter of time, right? So I think the technology's there. It's just that now the price needs to come down. And we will do what we can to help facilitate that by just getting more of these batteries out there and the earlier adopters who are willing maybe to pay a little more, and we able to provide some additional incentive to make that happen. Now, for community-based, that's the part, that's really exciting. Has everyone heard the term microgrid?
Yeah.
And everyone's heard the term microgrid. I've heard it so much that I just assume it like it exists, right? It's like it's happening. It's, you know, you can go into a community and if they're microgridded, then I don't know if that's the word, but if they're microgridded, then they're on. They're good, right? There's no place in the country that actually does that. It just doesn't exist yet. We talk about it, right? It's a great vision and idea, but actually, it's never been deployed in the way we're a community. So, and when I say community now, I'm talking about you have a circuit, right, lines that are serving, let's say, 50 people, and you have it so that if the power goes out, those 50 people will have power because there's technology attached to that line that keeps the electrons flowing, right? That is the future. That is what we need. That's the kind of resiliency that's gonna help us weather the kind of storms we're gonna see. So we will have, this will happen. We will have individual homes and businesses that have their own solar and batteries. We will have those same circuits. We'll have large batteries, large renewable generation. It could be hydro, it could be solar, it could be wind, that's charging that battery. And that'll help keep the entire circuit alive as well, so that area will be set when all the lines go down. That technology doesn't exist yet. We are testing that in the town of Panton. So we deployed a 5 megawatt solar facility, a 2 megawatt battery, and now, and this is where I learned. I was like, oh good, now we can microgrid it, we're all set now. And our engineer's like, no, there's lots of puts and takes. So in order to keep, now this is where I get way over my head, but you don't know better. I assume you know less than I do, right? So in order to keep the voltage, you know, where it needs to be, you know, it need to have a steady amount of whatever the hell goes through those lines, right? To keep it. Well, if all of a sudden you have homes, right, or businesses that turn on a bunch of power and drain a bunch, that can affect the voltage. Or you have, you know, sun comes out, a number of these homes have solar panels, and then all of a sudden you get this infusion of solar into these things and you have this. So it can affect and I'm sure it's more than just that, but just the quality of power on that grid. And the grid can collapse, so a lot of things can happen. This is where I get way over my pay grade here. But the bottom line is, we gotta figure that out. We gotta make sure that when we're using batteries and solar to keep a grid connected, that it can be done in a safe way, and that no one gets fried, or nobody's equipment gets fried, or our line crew don't get fried, all that stuff. So we're figuring that out, and I have great trust that we will. And then once we do, then that becomes a replicable model for the future of how energy is delivered. And that's where, again, the siting of solar is so important. So we have, in Vermont, it was like, we had nothing, right? No solar. And then everybody was like, we need to get solar, so let's just do everything we can. So we provided it. GMP started with a 6-cent adder initially back in 2008. Legislature loved the idea so much, it mandated for the entire state. And then, that's just for net metering, and then you had the standard offer program created, again, more solar. So you had so much emphasis being placed on how do we build out more solar, and then we started liberalizing the requirements, we increased the size of the systems. So all this stuff to kind of get the industry going, and it got going, as you saw from that chart, right? So we have so much development now that we're running into problems where areas are just super saturated with solar. And that's why we're trying to direct certain developers to other areas. But simply building more and more solar in our service territory, just to have solar, is not gonna get us to the resiliency that we need to get, moving forward. What's gonna be, to me, strategically, what we need to do moving forward, because there is a limit to how much we can actually absorb, right, of solar. We need to put that solar right on where the load is. It needs to feed the load directly. And then that's the first step in resiliency. You feed your building, you feed your home with solar. The next step is that you have your backup batteries there so that you can literally disconnect from the grid. That's the second step. That's the strategic direction I believe we need to move in, and not simply building more and more solar, because the problem you're identifying, I think, is what's happening. So we've had circuits. The way it works in the utility world is, if, let's say, everyone on this side of the table put up solar and we're able to handle it no problem, and all of a sudden Don here wants to now put in a system on his rooftop. But his system actually is gonna cause a voltage issue. So Don, yeah, you can put up your $20,000 solar on your roof, but you're gonna have to pay $80,000 to fix the problem because it's already saturated. Well, Don is like, no, I'm not gonna pay $80,000, I'll just wait. So what happened was that circuit just stopped. We could not accept any more solar for that circuit because someone had to pay for that upgrade, right? And Don wisely said, I'm not paying for it, right? And then Walter was like, well, I'm not paying for it, right? And he's like, well, I'm not paying for it, right? So nothing happened, right? So we want that rooftop. We want Don and Walter, whatever your name is. Zach to have solar. We want, especially kind of that resilient type solar on their rooftop. So what we did is we went to the Public Utility Commission and we asked them if we can change the rule. So rather than Don having to pick up the entire freight, we will pay for, Green Mountain Power will pay for that upgrade. And then we will prorate that based on a cost per kilowatt of their system when they connect. So now, rather than $80,000, Don's gonna pay $250, and then Walter's gonna pay $300, and you're gonna, well, Zach is gonna pay $400, bigger system. And so anybody who comes in after that will pay that. So we got approval for that, and so now we're able to open up the gate again to allow those kind of. So I don't know if that's what happened there, but there was news about that, and unfortunately it was misconstrued because that is what we did, but it was actually reported as Green Mountain Power was increasing fees to connect solar. And that, nothing could be further from the truth. We weren't increasing fees, we're actually changing the fee structure to allow more solar to happen. So that was TGFOV, TG, transmission ground fault over voltage is what it's called. So I said it enough times I actually can remember that.
Well, I think the nuance of what I was talking about is it's not in like the residential world. I don't wanna just protect the innocent without naming names, but you had an organization that was looking to buy solar power and agreed with someone that owned a piece of property locally to set up an array, and I mean, it was a school, it was an enterprise size system that they were looking to have installed. And the place that they ran into, the problem was with the local utility. It wasn't Green Mountain Power, but it was another local utility, was just refused to actually use it. And what I allow them to transmit over the lines, and my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the net metering program is that, so let's say, he's producing 100% capacity out of his solar array, and the school system only needed 70% of that, but my understanding is that there's some rule or law that other 30% that goes into the system, whether the system needs it or not, needs to be reimbursed to the solar owner. Is that
That's right.
Yeah.
sound
Go
right?
ahead, yeah. So I don't know the circumstance, but just so any net metering that's built, utilities have to take, so they have no choice. That's number one. So if you build an array and you have an off-taker, and that off-taker can't absorb the full amount, then you just get another off-taker, and they do that. they do that. So you may have 1, 2, 3, 4. Some systems, true community systems, where they're building and they want to serve as many people in the community, could have 50, 60, 70, 100, right? So utilities have to get it. There is a mechanism to make sure that whatever is produced is being used by, or used, because it's all virtual, by off-takers. And the developer who's building that solar, the utility has to pay them the full cost, the full amount that we're required to pay them, which is residential rate plus the various adders or incentives from earlier years. So utilities have to pay that. And if you're putting your system right onto the grid, then the entire amount of that energy is all considered excess. It's all, it's basically a generator, and we gotta pay the higher amount. As opposed to, if it goes into, I have it on my rooftop, it goes into my home, I'm using that energy, what's ever left over gets put onto the grid, and then that's, then only that part that gets put on the grid is what receives the added benefits or incentives.
So would you say that was like, the scenario might be an argument to kind of look at trying to improve some of those community systems that you had mentioned earlier?
I think, again, strategically, I think it's simply just building more systems out there, just for the heck of having more solar, doesn't get us to the resiliency that I think we need to get to. So I'd much rather that school figure out a way to actually put the solar on their roof or in their backyard where it's actually feeding them directly. That'll reduce costs for all of the customers as well as provide the resiliency that they need. Yeah. So again, 5 years ago, getting out there everywhere, anywhere was kind of the thing to do. And it still can happen, it still is happening, but again, we need to think more strategically moving forward, given the limitations of the grid and how much it can actually handle. Yeah.
You talked about the battery systems. Do they have to be charged by solar, or can they be charged?
Thank you. No, they don't. Thank you very much. So a lot of the customers who actually, of the over 2,000 batteries that we have out there, vast majority of them are just in homes without solar. They're charged when we'll discharge them when we need to discharge them, and then we'll recharge them when energy is cheap. That's usually at night. When power goes down, they'll have, that battery to fuel their house, but that's all they have. It doesn't get recharged until the lines come back on. So they just have to be super careful in terms of using that battery. If you have solar, then at least there'll be opportunities, hopefully, it's January, February, March, to recharge. But yeah, thank you, that's a great question.
Right, and another question regarding nighttime. Do you have any plans to increase or change your systems regarding peak and off-peak time of use, metering and?
Yeah, just the standard time of use for businesses.
No, I'm talking about time of use for electric thermal storage heating. Are you familiar with that type of heating systems in houses?
No.
Okay, that's a system that was put in the 80s
Okay.
mostly, and it heats up a box of bricks in your home,
Right.
and it disperses it whenever.
Yes.
It's all done at off-peak.
Okay.
So today, with so much wind and hydro,
Yes.
I'm told that you have an excess at the nighttime, that you still have a peak and off-peak.
Yeah.
Is that something you've been looking into more as far as?
Yes, the conversations have begun. It's more about daytime. So we need more load during the day.
Okay.
So
yeah.
right now, peak has always been daytime. So you pay more when you use energy during the daytime. But now again, with all the solar, we actually need more load during the day. So it may become, so we're talking about it,
Yeah.
where daytime becomes off-peak. But we haven't figured it out. We just have those conversations. Yeah.
The legislature in the last couple of years, particularly in the Agriculture Committee, looking at rural economic development, has been trying to address the whole thing about peak time energy. Now I just lost the term, because I've had to pay it before, for my electric bill when I had a
Demand charge.
sawmill. Demand.
Demand charge. Yeah.
Demand charge. They did, I guess, ask Public Service to do a study on that. I don't know what the results of that study is yet.
Right.
But I'm just curious, how are we gonna solve that now? Because that is a big cost of doing business, especially in manufacturing.
Yeah, it's, you know, so the demand charges, it's, for those of you who are in businesses, you probably know about this. It's how do you, in the utility world, again, you want cost causes pay. So we don't want, you know, you, Zach, paying for Walter if he winds up using a lot more energy. And we have to increase our infrastructure or buy additional power to meet his higher demand or higher use during a particular time. So we want him to have to pay for that. Well, demand charges make sure that Walter pays for that and you don't. If you're not careful or you don't have a lot of control over your daily use of energy, those demand charges can get pretty hefty. But it does force you to think about efficiency and think about what you can do to reduce your peaks, your demands. And we actually work with all our commercial customers to help them do that as well, so there's efficiency of mind, help them figure out how to reduce their demand. You know, it's a delicate dance because it is, if you have a demand charge, it means you're creating more costs on the grid and you need to pay for that. The best we can do is find out ways to reduce those costs.
Well, I had a sawmill back in the 80s. Fremont Power said, we're gonna put you on demand rate in 1 year. Put a special meter in for me. Tell me when I'm hitting demand, okay? Now, everyone thought, well, it's when you start your motors. I had a couple of 200 horsepower, had a couple of 400 horsepower motors. So what I would do, and your demand is every 15 minutes of time. So whenever you hit that peak at that 15-minute period, that's what your bill's gonna be based on. So if you can level out your demand, you keep that peak down so you can keep your costs down. So I hired somebody, I had one employee come in at 2 hours early, every 16 minutes would turn on another motor. So by the time the crew showed up to work, all the motors were running, and I spread out that demand over the day to do that. Well, when I got the reports from you that did the metering for me, it would be at 11:45 in the morning when I would peak. And all the motors were already running. So I sat there and I tried to study it myself. And the debarker was on the log at the same time the log was going through the headstall, at the same time a big slag was going through the chipper. So it was the demand on the motor to work harder to carry the load. And how do you manage workflow? The flow of the materials through the mill with employees who are doing this work so that you don't have that happen. It's impossible. So I shut down my mill because I couldn't afford the power costs. It was next to my salaries, my payroll, it was the highest cost of doing business, and it killed me. So I had to shut it down. Now you're doing new things. Maybe you could have gave me batteries, maybe you could have gave me stuff now, but back then, none of that existed.
But I think it's just a heightened sensitivity to that, and you know, our folks will work with those commercial entities to help them figure out how to reduce their demand.
Well then, if I had the money, I would have bought a diesel generator, which would have solved the
And then
problem.
today we would went to you and say.
But
how
now
do
you're
we
telling me,
minimize
now you're
that?
telling people, get away from the diesel generators.
Yeah,
What would you have done then? I mean,
Exactly. Well, we would have said fine, but now, yeah, a new day, right? Yeah, definitely a new day.
So Robert, I have a question. If we have like a whole week of cloudy days like we have right now,
Yes.
when you look at your actual power flows, does most of that then be hydro?
So it's really the way the grid works. So you got what's on paper. So what's on paper
Yeah.
is, 90% carbon free, 6% renewable, and that's our contribution to the New England grid. If you think about the whole grid, all New England, we're claiming 60% high renewable because we have an infusion of power from Hydro-Quebec.
Right.
We got 100 megawatts of wind energy coming from New Hampshire. We got Seabrook Nuclear Power Plant coming from, so we have those contracts, we own those contracts, and our contribution to the New England grid is that, so that's what we have to claim. What actually happens on the grid from minute to minute, it depends, so as, if it's low usage, daylight today, kind of cloudy, lots of solar around New England have been built, but you're not gonna get a ton. I mean, they still produce it, don't get a ton. So then, ISO New England is looking to make sure that there's enough electricity being produced to meet demand. So they're gonna look to see what the resources are, and if it's a cloudy day and they thought they'd get some solar, but they're not, they're gonna have to ask certain plants to turn it on.
And
usually
use the
it's natural
gas
gas.
firearms.
Yeah, exactly.
Cause they can come up.
Right. So that's what happened, and to the extent that we are purchasing market power, so let's say 10% of our portfolio is in spoken for, we're buying market power, then you know that 10% is gonna be more natural gas. But that dynamic changes, every 15 minutes.
Just a quick question. You talked a lot about like the power pack or power wall batteries. Is there any viability in sort of larger scale, other types of technologies like pumped water storage or anything like that? Is that something you guys look at in the mix?
I would say, yes, how viable it is, and it's not my bailiwick, so I'm thinking of, we have our engineer who would be able to answer this a lot better. We look at everything, like all the technology, what's feasible, so from a technology perspective, from a cost perspective, what's feasible. Pumped water, if we're talking about natural streams and how that just becomes just challenging in and of itself, because anything to do from a waterways, getting permits for that is not easy. So you have to factor all that in deciding what's viable or not. All I can say is that technology is changing. I think there'll be a growing sensitivity to the need to be more resilient, especially if I have more of these conversations and try to scare the shit out of people, right? So I think you're gonna see more of that, and then looking at what those various options are, including the thing that he was talking about. And I actually did see that system once, because there's a home in Rutland that does that very thing. The heat, that you heat up blocks, you heat up off, and so I don't have a specific response to that, but just more broadly, yes, we're looking at everything, because it's a new day, a new dawn, and we have to.
One more thing about policy and renewables. I'm a forester, as you all know, and I lobby for the forest industry. And we're 80% forested. We could be one of the most forest-dependent states economically if we were to do it right. I'm just discouraged that biomass is not considered one of your big ticket items for renewability. You do have a little bit of a stake in Reigate. We only have 2 plants in Vermont. We've had a couple of entities interested in investing in biomass, and basically got chased out of the state by our legislature and our governors. It's discouraging. I mean, as a forest manager, my customers are the logging contractors and the sawmills and the paper mills. And it'd be nice if there were more biomass mills, because I'm trying to be very careful about taking care of the forest so that we have a balance, an ecological balance. But if we can't find markets for those low-grade trees, and then we have a lot of pressure from people who want to keep our forest intact. Well, the only way to keep our forests intact is for the landowners to make enough money so that they're not encouraged to think of other uses. So it's just a real quandary that I find myself in when I see people, just a Digger article that just came out a few days ago, talking about how Burlington Electric should no longer claim themselves as being renewable, and that burning wood is not carbon neutral. Well, it is, because you burn the wood, and then new trees grow and absorb that carbon you just burned. And then when we can get high-grade timber in there, we turn it into lumber, which this isn't, but paraphrasing, we're really storing carbon. I mean, it's a complicated topic, but it's one that Vermont could really embrace and really use if we can just step up and say, our forest could be part of our energy solution, and I'm not hearing it.
Well, I think I'm hearing more of that from the pellet, because there's a lot of promoting of wood pellets, both at home and industrial use. So it's being discussed differently. I do believe wood is a renewable resource. And again, when we're thinking about the future, the more resiliency, the more that we can produce and get from within our own borders particularly, the better. So, it's always been part of the equation. It's always been seen as a renewable resource. It's treated as such. It's part of our portfolio. I don't see it going away, and now it's gaining momentum because of the whole pellet movement. Maybe its day is still yet to come again.
But the pressures are just unreal.
Yeah. So it was
as I said earlier, we truly do work really hard to keep our costs down, and we're very successful. The rate impact would have been much higher had we not been able to find internal savings to offset those costs, again, that we don't have control over. And we're looking at those costs. So part of it's state energy policy, and what we're paying for that. Moving forward, we're hoping that there'll be some adjustments so that we don't have to pay more than necessary for meeting the obligations that we have from the state. But 2.72% is what got approved for October 1, and then it's a 3-year plan. Next year is 2.72, and the following year is 2.72 as well. So at least you know what the trajectory is for the next 3 years. We looked at our rate increases or rate changes over the past 10 years, and we are still below inflation, if that helps at all. But that's the trajectory we're on. But also on the bill is separate line item charges, right? So there is a new one called the Emerald Ash Borer charge,
We're
right?
familiar with that thing.
Yeah, right. And now, how many counties is that in now?
It's in all of them.
It's in all of them. So, and the problem with the Emerald Ash Borer is that when they infect a tree, the tree is usually dead within 3 years,
So,
3 to 5.
pretty close.
Yeah. And it's not like, okay, tree's dead, let's remove it. It's tree is dead, oh boy, the upper limbs are much more brittle now. And you can't just simply, saw it down and expect it to do this. It's actually much more dangerous because the limbs just fall off, the top just does this. So much more dangerous. So shatters. Removal of those trees, once they've been infected and die, is very expensive. So we're going in proactively, and I think towns are also, and planning commissions are looking at this as
We
well.
foresters there too.
Foresters proactively and trying to remove, which is sad, right? But it's just a reality, unfortunately, we live in, removing them proactively. We put in $1.2 million to start that removal process. And frankly, we'll see how it goes. I was gonna say, I don't see that being enough money to do the kind of work, but what we're limited by is the number of actually people out there who actually can do the work.
Well, the ash markets are still very strong, so you can make money harvesting ash trees. Right?
Okay, yeah, this would be the.
As long as the market stays strong, and it is very strong.
Well, and it's a dwindling resource, so you would think.
It's one of the highest value trees in the forest right now.
Wow, really? You do an inventory at home. All right. And then there's a separate storm charge, and that, we had some major storms a few years now, and totaling $24 million. We did not say, okay, we gotta build $24 million, let's just divvy it up and ask our customers to pay that upfront and get hit with that shock. What we asked our regulators to do is just allow us to collect that back over 3 years. So the 3 years of the rate plan includes collecting that $24 million, smoothing out the impact. And let's just hope, right, because we get other big storms, then that's just gonna add to the cost. So just be mindful of that. And personally, I like that those charges are being separated out, because it just highlights some of the challenges we're facing in this new reality of climate change. And that's what this is. The once in 50-year storms are happening, or 100-year storms, whatever, they're happening every year. Every year I've been at Green Mountain Power, we got hit with at least one doozy, and in some years multiple doozies. So, but so we don't like to have rate increases. Sorry about that, we truly am, and we'll continue to work to do what we can to keep our costs down. But it is a reality that we face. But let's leave on a positive note.